Hey everybody, today I want to talk about the two different ways you can light your scene within D5 Render. So if we go over here to our Environment tab, you're going to see Geo and Sky and HDRI. These are two vastly different systems, and I feel like people get a little bit confused about when you would use each. So I'm going to break it down. This is how I like to think of it. Geo and Sky, think of this as a fully dynamic system. So what I mean by that is with this slider, I can actually customize every single aspect of my light setup or my environment settings. So I'm talking about time of day, right? The rotation, which is our north offset, our clouds, because this is all dynamic. These are dynamically being spawned in and generated, and it is affecting the lighting. So notice as I lower the clouds, it gets brighter. As I increase it, it gets more overcast. So this is what I mean by fully dynamic. So then switching gears to HDRI. If you're not familiar with what it is, it's a high dynamic range image. So what this means is there's this super high res image that's actually driving all the lighting and the shadow information that goes into an image. So if I just click, let's say sunset 2, this is going to be loaded, and this is what's driving the color and the time of day. I can rotate it, but I can't change the position of the sun. I can't change the height. So if this says midday, right? The sun is literally midday, right over here, right? I can't make it go lower. I can't make it go higher unless I do what's considered a custom sun. So actually right down here, I can break the sun's position to no longer lock with the HDRI. So what that means is if I hit custom here, and now let me just rotate the azimuth, so the rotation. The picture, my HDRI is behind me, right? But now I'm making my shadows come the other way. So that's what I mean by that. So you can customize it a little bit, but it's not equivalent to the dynamic system where everything is tied to one another. So going back to HDRI, why would you use this? HDRI, in my opinion, offers much higher quality output. It tends to be a little bit more realistic just because of how much more shadow and lighting information is baked into the image, but you need to sacrifice your customization for quality, right? And again, you could override a little bit with this, but I don't really recommend it. It looks really weird when you have like two suns, as if we're like on Tatooine for all my Star Wars fans out there. But in general, when it's coming to client work, I try to stick to HDRI. I think Geo and Sky, the dynamic system, is really good if you're, let's say, on the design side, and you really need to understand almost like a sun study of how the light will come through your project during different times of day, right? So this, I highly recommend. If you're using it for design, you need to just fine tune everything. You know, you need to make sure the shadows are coming in a specific way. If you're going for visual fidelity, stick with HDRI. The other cool thing about, both these systems is like, they're both photorealistic. Like I'm not saying Dynamic Sky is not, it's just, I've noticed it's much nicer with HDRI. Another thing I'll point out when it comes to light setups, in terms of how you actually do this, you can obviously tinker and manually tweak these, and it might take a little bit of time. I think when you're starting out, I highly recommend checking out the D5 Studio. It's this little purple button. If you click this and then switch to D5 Curated, these are really nice light setups that came from D5. And when you double click them, they'll actually load in. And these will vary between HDRI systems or dynamic sun systems. But it's nice to see like which settings they're using, just so you can kind of understand how to put it together yourself. So again, both options totally valid, but it's important for you to understand when to use what. So you can see these are all HDRI. The other thing I'll point out is we have our AI atmosphere match, which will actually generate light settings based off of a photo, like a reference photo that you like, but it'll also add in effects like color correction and all that. So just to show you an example, or to upload this image, very atmospheric, cloudy type of image, it's going to apply it here, and all these settings are editable. So again, it doesn't really matter which way you go with, it's all about the output. But I think it's really important for you to understand like when to use what, and they're both super useful. So here you can see it's starting to change. So the colors are becoming more blue. You see that happening. We're seeing more clouds here, and there we go. So like I was saying, this is all dynamic. So this is HDRI. So it made this HDRI from the atmosphere match, which is really, really cool. And so you can rotate it, right? You could also do your custom sun if you want. Perks of doing it this way. So personally, what I recommend for anyone new to rendering, I would go straight for the HDRI find a nice high quality HDRI. You can find these online or just use the default ones built into D5, or use the Sun Studio or the D5 Studio, grab light setups. I think these are all great. Here you can see I'm tweaking. So I want to talk a little bit about what settings do I actually tweak and like how do you actually make good lighting. So I'm going to go through both. Let's talk about Geo and Sky. The first most important thing, in my opinion, is your time of day and the angle the sun is coming through. What you should always do is aim for like a 45-degree angle of your sun from behind you, okay? Never do directly behind you. So when you do that, you get like these weird kind of setups where you have no depth because there's no sunlight on your object. So try to rotate it in a way where you're getting something like that, and your shadows are pointing to something interesting. So here it's kind of leading the eye, right? So that's the first thing I always do. Next thing I'll do on the Dynamics Sun system, if I want a little more customization, I'll go to Custom Sky, and this is where I can increase or lower the sun intensity. I generally don't go beyond 3 because then it gets really crazy. But I do get this guy, the sun disk radius, and I think this is something people always forget about. If I were to get really close to shadows, right, and then increase this guy, you see how my shadows are softening? I like to keep this around 5. So it starts off sharp and then it fades out. I find that to be most realistic, but you only get that when you turn on your custom sun, right? If I turn it off, you see how that's not there? So that gives you, almost like advanced settings. And then almost like this little gizmo that we have here, you have to do it via altitude. So that's the height, right? The height of the sun in the sky. And then azimuth, which is the rotation, right? So again, very similar to the gizmo before, but just a different way of doing that. So think of these as advanced settings. These are the first things I tweak. And then I'll typically layer in a little bit of fog, just a little bit. It helps add some depth for my background and foreground and everything. And then I'll also add, if I'm feeling atmospheric, maybe some precipitation. So I usually start from the top and I go all the way down. On the HDRI side, first, I want to think about which HDRI am I going to use? What is the time of day? And the beauty of scenes in D5 is it'll actually save all your different environment settings and layer visibility settings. So you could easily have an HDRI that's cloudy, and then another one that's midday, and that's all saved. So beauty of that. So once I pick an image, I'll rotate it just to get it in the right spot, and then I'll fine tune the intensity or the brightness of the background image, okay? So that's what this guy's doing. Then there's skylight. Skylight, you can kind of see, is the light that's bouncing around from the actual HDRI. If I increase this, I'm getting more bounce lighting intensity. See how it's dark here? And then when I increase this, I'm getting more color and power from the HDRI to bounce around. So that's why we're seeing that. This, I think it really depends on the image. I can literally go anywhere from like 0.2 to like 0.9, depending on the image. Like I don't want it to be dark. Like this is very, very dark. I mean, good for its own purposes, but for me, I want a little bit of light to be bouncing there because there's really nice, beautiful colors in the image, and this is the only way you're going to get them to come through. So then from there, I'll tweak the actual temperature. So you can see how I'm making it warmer here, adding some yellow there, and then this is going to make it much cooler or bluer. I usually don't tweak this too much, but this is going to drive, the overall color temperature. The sun is very similar to the custom sun we saw before in the dynamic system. This is going to let you literally turn the lights on and give you some more intensity controls and softness settings. So see how it's sharp here? If I increase this, it'll soften. And I usually always have this on follow HDRI. So when I spin my image around, the sunlight is coming from the same part of the image. Otherwise you get that weird thing I was talking about with like Tatooine, right? And then I'll add a little bit of fog, but that's really it. Those are the main settings I use. And these two systems can yield so much variety between them. So I highly recommend playing with both, but just as a recap, because I know I stressed it a lot, but just to make sure you get it. I use the dynamic system if I need to be really, really particular about the sun and studying it. And then I'll use HDRI more for photorealism, just to make sure I'm getting the most quality out of my images. That's really it. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, please drop a like or a comment if you have a question, and subscribe. Really helps the channel out. So I'll see you guys next time.